People like you aren't needed here. Just disappear." My boss, Leona, sneered. She always had something cruel to say whenever we crossed paths. I had finally reached my breaking point. With a forced smile, I responded, "Useless people should be fired, right?" Leona looked at me, thinking I was agreeing with her. "Yeah, finally you get it," she said smugly. Leona seemed to notice something strange in my tone, but took it as submission. She quickly reverted to her usual arrogant self, flashing that familiar condescending grin. Little did she know that the next day in the shareholder meeting, she would be kneeling before me. "My name is Thorne, a 44-year-old salaried worker. Life had been relatively smooth until my father passed away from a stroke just before my high school graduation. Losing the family's main source of income put my mother and me in a difficult position. My mom had no job experience, and I was preparing for my college entrance exams. On top of that, I had a younger brother who was smarter and had our father's high expectations placed on him. I believed he had a better chance at succeeding in college, so I made a tough choice. I decided to skip higher education and jump straight into the workforce. I took on a part-time job close to home, and after a few years, I secured a full-time position. The company I worked for wasn't a huge, well-known corporation, nor did it pay as much as some of the bigger firms, but it had a welcoming and friendly atmosphere. Despite only having a high school diploma, I felt like I belonged. Many of my colleagues shared their knowledge and gave me helpful advice. A lot of this camaraderie was thanks to the company's president, John Williams. President Williams had also been forced to give up college due to family circumstances, and he built this company from scratch with a close friend. Many employees like me only had a high school education or even less, but he treated us with respect. He regularly invited us out for meals and gave generous bonuses. His kindness and down-to-earth nature earned him the admiration of every single employee. Unfortunately, the peaceful atmosphere was disrupted when Leona came on board. She had been recruited as a department head because of her supposed talents. Leona came from a wealthy background and attended elite schools. She flaunted her expensive jewelry and designer clothes, constantly bragging about her lifestyle. But more than anything, her attitude was what really set her apart, and not in a good way. She looked down on anyone without an impressive education and treated those of us with only a high school or middle school diploma as though we were beneath her. Unsurprisingly, Leona wasn't popular with the rest of the staff. She particularly disliked me and would make snide remarks whenever we crossed paths. "So, just a high school diploma? Huh, I don't need someone like you on my team," she would say with a smug smile. Hearing this constantly was exhausting. One day, fed up with her attitude, I asked her directly why she spoke to me in such a nasty way. Her response was shocking. "People like you, poor and uneducated, are unpleasant to look at. I don't want to see you." It wasn't just words either. Leona would never assign me any meaningful tasks. Instead, she handed me trivial jobs that no one else wanted to do. Just the day before, she had given me a broom and a rag and told me to clean out an old storage room full of junk. "This room might be useful someday," she had said. "Even someone like you should be able to handle it." I tried to explain that I was too busy with other responsibilities, but she wouldn't listen. Maybe we could take care of it during the year-end cleanup. I suggested politely, hoping to avoid conflict. Leona exploded. "Are you refusing an order from your superior? You need to restart your career from scratch," she yelled, shoving the broom into my hands. With no other option, I started cleaning. After about 10 minutes, Leona got bored and walked off, saying, "Next time, do it right when you're told. I'll let you off the hook for now." Relieved, I returned to my actual work, but it didn't end there. A few hours later, Leona stormed back into my office, furious. "Why did you stop cleaning halfway? Don't you have any sense of responsibility?" I was beyond frustrated but kept quiet, listening to her rant. By the end of the day, I was physically and mentally drained. The whole office wondered how someone like Leona had ever become a department head. She had managed to charm the higher-ups during her interview by presenting herself as a friendly, capable leader. Her impressive track record at her previous job also helped her secure the role. When she first joined the company, she had everyone fooled. She was all smiles, eager to collaborate, and seemed like a breath of fresh air. Even President Williams was impressed with her. But as time went on, her true nature became clear. Leona was a tyrant. She flattered the executives while treating her subordinates with absolute disrespect. Her behavior created tension throughout the office. Employees whispered about how things would be better if she were replaced. The atmosphere became even worse when small thefts started happening. People's money and belongings would disappear from the office. We were all trying to figure out who the thief could be. Despite our efforts to enforce locker use and remind people not to leave their things unattended, the thefts continued. I was determined to uncover who was behind the thefts, but then something even more shocking happened. As I was about to head out for lunch, Leona stormed up to my desk and slammed a document down in front of me. "Don't think you can just go out for lunch. What are you going to do about this?" she barked, shoving an email and a client complaint in my face. I quickly glanced at the email. It was from one of our clients. "Your products are of the worst quality, frequently damaged and overpriced. We are terminating future business." I was stunned. Leona wasted no time accusing me of sending the email, but I knew I hadn't. I pointed out that the email wasn't even sent from my address, but that didn't stop her. She was relentless. "Everyone else handling this client is a college graduate. Only someone like you would send such an unprofessional message," she snapped, her insults cutting deep. She continued calling me a menace to the company. It was the last straw. Her accusations and relentless insults pushed me over the edge, and I decided that it was time to put an end to this once and for all. Instead of backing down, I forced a smile and said, "Useless people should be fired, right?" Leona paused, sensing something was off, but her arrogance quickly returned. She sneered, clearly convinced that I had finally accepted my supposed worthlessness. From that moment on, she kept making her usual snide remarks. "It's nice not to have a nuisance around," or "I'm glad I don't have to babysit an incompetent employee anymore," she'd say. Her ignorance was almost laughable. The very next day, the company's shareholder meeting was scheduled. When I arrived at the venue, Leona spotted me immediately. She marched up to me, full of anger. "What are you doing here? This meeting is for important people only," she spat, her voice dripping with disdain. I calmly explained that I had been instructed to attend, but she wasn't interested in hearing anything I had to say. She started pushing me toward the door, insisting I leave before I embarrassed myself in front of the president. As I tried to figure out how to stay while being pushed out, the shareholder meeting was just about to begin. That's when the president arrived. Leona wasted no time putting on her fake polite smile, explaining, "This is Thorne. He was trying to attend the meeting without knowing his place. I was just sending him away." The president's face darkened, and he turned to her with a stern look. "What are you talking about? Smith here holds 95% of the company's shares. As a special controlling shareholder, he has every right to attend the meeting." Leona's face turned pale. She stared at me, trembling. When I nodded slowly in confirmation, she let out a short panic scream and collapsed onto the floor. The realization had hit her like a truck. She had no idea who I really was. In reality, I own 95% of the shares of the company where I worked. A shareholder with over 95% is called a special controlling shareholder, a powerful position with the ability to demand that all other shareholders sell their shares through a resolution by the board of directors. This information was common knowledge among the management level and above, but somehow Leona had been completely in the dark. She had made herself thoroughly disliked, acting superior right from the start, and no one had bothered to inform her of my background. Now she sat on the floor, mumbling in confusion, unable to process what had just happened. Unable to bear the scene any longer, the president began to explain. This company was actually founded by Thorne's father, who was the original president. However, when Thorne was still in high school, his father suddenly passed away from a stroke. His best friend, who was the vice president at the time, stepped in and became the president. He paused, letting it sink in before continuing. The plan was always for Thorne to join the company after graduating to groom him as the next president. There were discussions about making him president right away, but we decided it was better for him to gain experience first rather than risk the company due to inexperience. He went on, explaining that I had inherited 95% of the company's shares from my father and had been learning the ropes from the current president ever since. My younger brother, the one who had gone to college, now worked as the executive vice president. I'm glad to see that Smith has grown into a capable leader. I've even been considering stepping down as president soon, the president said, casting a proud glance in my direction. Leona, still struggling to stand, mumbled incoherently. She couldn't seem to wrap her head around the truth. I thought he was just some uneducated nobody, she muttered, her voice barely audible. It was then that the president turned to her, his voice firm. Watch your language. A person's value isn't determined by their educational background. Instead of reflecting on her mistakes, Leona tried to argue, but it's wrong for him to hold 95% of his shares. It's just because he's the former president's son that he has that kind of power. Her argument didn't hold water, and the president quickly shut it down. That's not the point here. You've disrespected not only Smith, but the entire company by your actions. Your education doesn't give you the right to look down on others. Leona stood there, completely defeated. Her arrogance and ignorance had led her to this moment, and now there was no saving face. I'm much more competent and contribute far more to the company, judged by ability, Leona declared, as if she truly believed she was superior to everyone around her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The president seemed equally astonished, letting out a deep sigh before speaking in a low, controlled voice. Smith is far more competent than you. He listens to the needs of the employees, continuously improves company operations, and boosts morale in the workplace. Leona, however, was not ready to accept defeat. I do that too, she blurted out, clearly trying to compete, but her argument only seemed to make the president angrier. His face hardened. Don't be ridiculous. Do you think I'm unaware of what's been going on? I've received multiple reports of you harassing other employees. You're not boosting morale, you're tearing it down. The president's tone shifted from disappointment to outright frustration as he began listing her wrongdoings. You've been putting on a good face for me and the upper management, but I've heard all about the way you treat your subordinates. Looking down on people because of their education, giving out pointless tasks, and interfering with their actual work instead of helping them grow. Leona tried to offer weak excuses, but the president had clearly lost patience. Enough, he said sharply. You don't need to say anything more. You're neither an executive nor a shareholder, so you shouldn't even be attending this shareholder meeting. I sent an email about this, Leona said, looking confused. What? I thought that was a mistake. I'm an extremely competent employee, right? She continued, her arrogance still apparent. I figured the president must have accidentally left me off the list. The audacity she displayed, assuming the president made an error and then crashing the meeting uninvited, showed just how bold and clueless she really was. The president sighed deeply and turned away from her. Regardless of what you thought, you weren't invited. I'll be calling you in tomorrow. For now, go home, he ordered. Leona was relentless. But I'm a highly valued department head. I'm essential to this meeting, she insisted, trying to force her way into staying. But the president wasn't having any of it. He sternly ordered her to leave, and after a long pause, she finally retreated. Watching the entire scene unfold left me stunned. The president had always been kind and gentle, treating his employees like family. In all the years I'd known him, I had never seen him so furious. This incident had clearly pushed him to his limit. After Leona's dramatic exit, the shareholder meeting resumed and concluded without any further issues. As I gathered my things and prepared to head home, I reflected on how chaotic the day had been. Between Leona's outburst and the president's rare display of anger, I was mentally exhausted. All I wanted was to go home and relax, but little did I know, the drama wasn't over yet. As I made my way toward the taxi stand, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. I turned around to see Leona rushing toward me. She caught up, breathless, but wearing a strange grin on her face. "Oh, good, I made it in time," she exclaimed. I raised an eyebrow, puzzled. "Why are you still here? I thought you had already left." Ignoring my question, she launched into a speech, her expression shifting to something almost desperate. "The president said he'd call me in tomorrow, but I have a bad feeling about it. I thought I'd ask you for a favor, Mr. Smith." "A favor?" I repeated, already feeling a sense of dread. Something told me this wasn't going to be good. Leona suddenly bowed deeply in front of me. "I'm sorry for everything I've said and done. I'm apologizing now, so could you please say some nice things about me to the president?" I stared at her, completely unmoved. "You're not apologizing because you feel bad," I said coldly. "You just want to escape the consequences. I refuse." I turned to walk away, but she quickly moved to block my path, her arms spread wide. She kept bowing repeatedly, almost like she was doing some strange, desperate dance. Passers-by started staring, and a group of children began giggling at the bizarre scene unfolding in the middle of the street. It was painfully awkward, but she seemed oblivious to how ridiculous she looked. When Leona finally realized how much attention she was attracting, she straightened up, her face red with embarrassment. "Anyway," she muttered quickly, "make sure to support me tomorrow. I'm your boss, remember." With that, she sprinted off as quickly as she had arrived. She didn't get far, though. Leona tripped spectacularly, falling to the ground with a loud thud. I pretended not to notice and quietly made my way home. The next day, when I arrived at work, Leona limped toward me with a bandage wrapped around her leg. "I hurt myself after I fell yesterday. I scraped my leg and got bruises. It was awful," she said, clearly fishing for sympathy. "Is that so? What a misfortune," I replied flatly, offering no real concern. If it had been anyone else, I might have shown some compassion, but after everything she had done, I couldn't bring myself to care. Before Leona could say anything else, she quickly reminded me, "Don't forget, the president has something important to discuss with us today." "Yes," I said. I was told to go to his office as soon as I arrived. Since we were both summoned, I reluctantly walked alongside Leona. She insisted on moving slowly, complaining about her injured leg the entire way, which only made the journey more irritating. Despite everything, she still hadn't apologized to me in any meaningful way. I felt completely justified in not forgiving her. As I knocked on the president's door and entered, we were greeted with the sternest expression I had ever seen on the president's face. The moment Leona caught sight of him, her entire demeanor changed. She straightened up as if she hadn't just been complaining moments ago. "Good morning, Mr. President. What can I do for you today?" she asked, all sweetness and politeness. If anyone hadn't witnessed her behavior the day before, they might have believed she was a kind and courteous employee. But the president wasn't fooled. He looked at her coldly. "It's too late to fix your attitude now. Your punishment has already been decided," he said flatly. "Punishment? What do you mean, punishment?" Leona's face turned pale, but the president continued without hesitation. You are being dismissed for misconduct. We no longer need you at this company." "You mean I'm fired? That's too harsh." Leona stammered, trying to approach the president, but stumbling due to the pain in her injured leg. The president continued, "As for the reasons for your dismissal, first and foremost, there's your harassment of subordinates." Leona's eyes widened, and she tried to defend herself. "I haven't harassed anyone. I'll admit I've been strict, but it was only to train my subordinates." Despite me standing right there as a witness, Leona boldly insisted on her innocence. The president's brow furrowed even deeper as he pulled out a voice recorder from his desk. "This recorder contains proof of your abusive remarks," he said, pressing play. Leona's nasty comments about people's education and their job roles played back loud and clear. Her words echoed through the room, leaving not just the president and me, but even Leona herself looking shocked. "Did I really say all that?" she murmured, her face turning even paler. I stepped forward, speaking calmly but firmly. "Yes, you did, and we had to endure it every day. Can you understand our frustration and anger?" For the first time, Leona wavered. "I'm sorry," she whispered. It was the first genuine apology I had ever heard from her, but her wrongdoings didn't stop there. The president nodded at me and then continued, "The second reason for your dismissal is that you caused trouble with our clients. Just ask Smith." The president pulled out a document, the same one detailing the email incident from the day before the shareholder meeting. An investigation into the company's computers revealed that the offensive email was sent from your computer. Do you have an explanation? Leona's face fell. "I'm sorry, I wrote that email," she confessed quietly, knowing she couldn't argue with the evidence. After admitting to the email, Leona began to explain why she had treated me so horribly. "I worked so hard to graduate from an elite university and struggled to become a department head, but Smith, just a high school graduate, is well liked by the other employees. It made me so angry, so I thought I'd scare him a little. It was just a prank, I didn't mean any harm." Her selfish reasoning made the president slump in his chair in exasperation. "Don't make childish excuses," he said. "And what about the third reason for your dismissal?" He then showed us footage from the security cameras that had been installed in the office. The video clearly showed Leona sneaking around, searching for valuables. Leona's previously apologetic demeanor vanished as she stared intently at the screen, sweating nervously. "Wait, I checked the security cameras. I shouldn't be on tape," she muttered in disbelief. The president remained calm but firm. "We recently installed additional security cameras because employees' wallets and personal belongings had been going missing. Even as a department head, you resorted to theft. What were you thinking?" At this, Leona collapsed to the floor, all her strength gone. She hung her head and began to sob quietly, but eventually, through her tears, she started to speak the truth. "I bought too many luxury items and went into debt. The repayment deadline was coming up, and my parents refused to help me anymore, so I started stealing from the employees." I was shocked. I had no idea that Leona had been buying luxury goods on credit and couldn't repay her debts with her salary. Her family had abandoned her, leaving her in a dire situation. "Why didn't you just sell the luxury items to pay off the debt?" I asked, my voice filled with disbelief. "I did," Leona sobbed, "but they said the items weren't popular or had scratches, so they didn't sell for much." I had initially held off on supporting her dismissal, thinking there might be a deeper reason behind her actions. But after hearing her explanations and reviewing the evidence, it became clear that her motivations were petty. She was much worse than I had imagined. The president sighed. "It took some effort to gather all the evidence, but I'm glad we made the right decision." He looked down at Leona, who was still on the floor trembling. "Leona, please reflect on your actions and atone for what you've done." As I spoke my final words to her, she looked up at me with tear-filled eyes and whispered, "I'm sorry," but I couldn't believe her apology. Not yet, not until she truly paid for her actions. Afterward, we consulted the police about Leona's thefts, and she ended up with a criminal record. A thorough investigation revealed that she had even stolen from donation boxes at temples and shrines, which ultimately led to her imprisonment. I could only hope that, in time, she would genuinely reflect on her actions and atone for her crimes. As for me, I spent my final year of training as Mr. Williams' secretary before finally becoming the president of the company. Moving forward, I vowed to continue valuing employees based on their performance, not their educational background. My brother, who had been the executive vice president, now stepped into the role of vice president. He became my indispensable right-hand man, and his dedication continues to inspire me. Together, we aim to create a workplace where every employee feels valued and success is built on respect and hard work, not on arrogance or entitlement.